San Francisco 49er to a Spectrum 48. Eduard Tomas is a writer, better check him on his Kates. Your data ain't got no dates, persistent while you wait. Scaling comparisons, paling forwards like Harrison's Millennium Falcons on my chase. You know there's some pairs of them, loosely coupled, that's the fairest one. 3 little bears while I'm eating porridge, while I'm reaping storage. Grim like Fat Boy Slim, praise you Rockefeller skank. Walker Sellers, that's Peter, got this clue so stitching ranks. Or stripes, bear heavy like mice. Metallica riff off a het field like that taking that Sam Man solo boarding that plane. Concepts hearing your fame. Nonsense, we on it like Bruce Lee on Bolo. Yeah! Our meetup number 21, for anybody who is new to our community, we are the Data on Kubernetes community. Our website is DoK.community. We're also on Twitter. We're also on LinkedIn. We have a Slack. We're doing these meetups every week to share different ideas with different folks from all over the world, talking about how to solve problems, how to deal with this whole approach of moving data onto Kubernetes. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today with Eduard. I would always like to remind everyone as well, too, if someone is interested in giving a talk, all you have to do is reach out, contact me, even here in the chat as well. I'd be happy to get names, email address, etc. We have different formats. We have meetups. We also do podcasts. We're also now creating resources, our own resources, animated videos, all kinds of different stuff. We also like to mix in culture, music, like I said earlier as well, different local languages, to really embrace all the different diversity that we have in our community of, I don't even know how many countries are represented, how many people we have. We've got around 270 people now from probably, I would say, at least 15, if not 20 countries, which is super cool and very, very exciting for me being able to meet all these wonderful people from different parts of the world. So with that being said, the wonderful person who we have with us today is Eduard. And I would like Eduard, first of all, just to, if you can just introduce yourself about who you are. Eduard works at a company called Plain Concepts. He recently informed me that they are now around 300 employees. They've grown very, very quickly. And Eduard, can you just tell us about, who you are, what you're doing at Plain Concepts, and also, what Plain Concepts does?
Yes, sure. I work in the Barcelona office of Plain Concepts. We are around 80 people, more or less, in the office, okay? And my, job title is principal tech lead, but what I really do is consultancy services, training services, and helping customers and helping people on the teams to be sure that we have a good quality, technical quality projects. And my specialty is cloud. Okay, so my typical job in Plain Concepts is helping customers to embrace the cloud. Okay, we in Plain Concepts are a service company. What we do is basically software for customers, a specific software for solving customers' needs. And also we like to help customers to, embrace new technologies or doing lift and shifts or modernizing applications or developing new cultures, like, for example, embracing DevOps and cloud native and whatever. So my specialty is basically try to help the customers to embrace the cloud. And that means not only Kubernetes, okay, that means PaaS services from Azure. We mostly work in Microsoft technologies, okay, so we mostly work in Azure, although we have some customers in AWS and Google Cloud and Alibaba also. Right. Okay, but our focus, our most customers are in Azure, and my job is help these customers to put or start embracing the cloud, new projects in the cloud, or put the existing workloads that they have in the cloud, and Kubernetes is just one of the options that I usually work on.
Okay, good. But before that as well too, I mean, how did you start working in technology in general?
Since I was a child, okay, because I have to say the luck that my father was a bit techy, okay, and he bought me a computer when I was, I think, maybe 3 years old or something like that. Okay.
Was this the Spectrum 48 you mentioned?
No, the Spectrum 48 came 3 or 4 years later. Okay,
Okay.
it was not really wasn't really a custom computer. Was a console. I think that was the video pack, the Magna Odyssey 2, but it comes with a keyboard. Okay, so and a cartridge that you can start programming, doing very simple things. Okay,
yeah.
and I think that just being able to type things and okay, I was just a child, but just start playing. I think that used to me to use computers, okay, and then he bought me the Spectrum when I was 7 years old, more or less.
Okay.
And in these times, there were a magazine called Micro Hobby, I think, that you had every week or every month, I don't remember, they put the source code of a very basic game that you can copy the code and play the game. And that was, oh, so if I copy this code, I can play the game. Maybe I want to learn to do that. Okay, that was the thing that, and then I started learning basic, then C++, and then I go to the university,
Yeah.
and then I started to work in consultancy. I have been my whole life working in different consultancy companies.
Okay, good. And now another thing as well, because we got a little bit of background about how you start out with tech, but something else from reading your Twitter profile is that you also have some other hobbies, right? Apart from, I mean, you know, tech is obviously your work, your passion, your profession. You also mentioned that you're into role-playing games.
Yes, yes. I have to say that I don't play a lot anymore for due to time lag, you know. Okay, but yes, I played a lot when I was younger. When I had more times with some friends. That every week the Fridays night were our role play night, and we start playing the Lord of the Rings, but then we make the jump to Rollmaster, Dungeons and Dragons, Paranoia, and we also have a lot of fun playing live role-playing game that's called Killer, when you try to kill all the rest of players. So very funny.
I think we'll have to play that sometime in our community. Now with that though as well, okay, so we've got a little bit about your personal interests. We'll touch on some more of those later, but then also with tech, okay? So what I wanted to take from this is with the idea of, role playing a role, we're talking about mentality, mindset, putting yourself in a certain mode, right?
Yep.
When did you start working with Kubernetes, and how do you feel that your mentality had to change when you started working with it?
I started working in Kubernetes due to a requirements when from working with Microsoft Corporation. They wanted to start promoting Kubernetes. They was not AKS at this time, okay? They was ACS, the name that they given, and they wanted us to. We usually collaborate with Microsoft, and they requested us to do some demos, okay? To showcase the the Kubernetes and all the things that ACS were capable to do. So prior to that, I just started to investigate Kubernetes, but not only Kubernetes. We were in the container wars between Mesos and Swarm and Kubernetes. So I was just looking all of three, just trying to understand what they did, what was the difference between using plain Docker Compose and was using these products, everything. So I was on the wave probably, okay, but I didn't really do any deep learning or investment on those platforms. Then when this project appeared, I need to do learning and try to reading documentation, start to learning, practicing, and doing everything with Kubernetes, okay, and I like it. I like it. I like it. The product. I like it. The ideas. Okay, and yes, it's. I don't know. I don't know how to answer what was my mentality change, because I think that was very gradual. Okay, I was a very long process probably for me. It took took a very long time because I started with very simple things and then I going to more complicated things. I think that one of the problems that a lot of customers are facing today when they are going to jump to Kubernetes is that they want everything at the first place,
Right.
and Kubernetes is hard to enter. You have at least for me, I think it has a good ramp to really dominate everything, all the concepts. Okay, I was saying the same things. You need to stop thinking in processors. You need to stop thinking in containers. You need to start thinking in pods, which is a different concept. Okay, it seems the same, but it's not the same. And you need to start thinking all the primitives that Kubernetes have. Kubernetes is low level. I usually talk with a lot of developers that they talk about APIs and webs, and no, Kubernetes is not that. Kubernetes is lower than that because you need to think about things like services and how they related to your pods and how do you want to scale that and how do you want to deploy that. So there are a lot of things that most developers aren't aware of. And I think that's one of the problems that I found most.
I think this is good. And once again, a beautiful relation. The fact that you mentioned earlier, the Lord of the Rings, it's not so simple. It's just taking a ring and throwing it into the fires of Mount Doom. There's a long process to get there.
Yeah.
So, be prepared to enjoy the adventure. And that's something else to embrace. I think that's good. Okay, cool. So next thing we want to think about, what was the most problematic part for you when dealing with traditional databases in Kubernetes?
Scaling. Scaling is hard in traditional databases out of Kubernetes. Okay. But was a thing that, okay, everyone knew that was hard and was solved using the pattern that each database have. Okay, but when then you go to Kubernetes scaling databases, I think that's very hard because it involves a lot of things that work together. Like, okay, it's not only the where we will store the data. Okay, it's not only the data will be stored here or here or here. Okay, it's always how we want to spin up new replicas or how we want to spin down new replicas. So you end having to learn a lot of concepts like, okay, what are the statefulsets? What are the headless services? What are these PVCs, storage classes? Then maybe you need to learn how to autoscale that if it makes sense. Put the horizontal pod autoscaler or maybe a vertical pod autoscaler. So there are a lot of concepts that work together, okay, but they are separated, but related, and it's very hard for people to trying to understand that. And it's easy to make mistakes and not be aware of that because it's very easy to put a single pod that is running your MySQL or your Postgres or whatever, and everything seems to work, and maybe you can put a persistent volume on that, and okay, I have my data stored in the cluster, but is this persistent volume is well configured? Where is really the data? Okay, because it's very easy to end up with a persistent volume that maybe stores the data in the node, okay, and then something happens and the pod is scheduled in another node and no longer finds the data. So there are a lot of casuistics that you need to understand.
All right, good. Now, with that in mind, what tools have been helpful for you when working with data on Kubernetes? You mentioned in your speaker profile about some experience with storageos or perhaps other tools like OpenEBS. Anything you want to comment on that? Yeah.
Yes. I have to say that these tools help a lot, but from my opinion, there are, I don't know how to say that, probably another maturity level that most of the customers that I work on really have, okay? Because these tools like OpenEBS, contain storageos, okay, that basically provides you like a data cluster which always scales and replicates, and the cache pattern, okay, for dealing with data. They are very helpful, okay, and probably they can really solve more the most problems that you have, but I think that they require level of maturity in Kubernetes. So you need to be comfortable yourself with Kubernetes. You need to make sure that you understand the basic building blocks of Kubernetes without dealing with these tools. Okay. And most of the customers I work on, I am working with helping them with adopting Kubernetes. Okay. So I usually don't go with these tools on the first place. Okay. Another thing is, okay, because, and that's important, one of the keys of our relationships as plain concepts with our customers is that we don't want that our customers depend on us. So our goal is to help the customers and then let it go. Okay, so okay, that is not we will build all that stuff for you and then you won't know how that works. You won't know how to manage that. You won't know how to scale that. Okay, no, we will build everything that you need. Okay, but also we will teach you, we will show you how to operate, manage, monitor everything. Okay, because we don't want that you need us. Okay, we want to be your partners in a period of time, but our goal is to make you self sufficient. Okay, that you can do everything by yourself. Okay, and that means that most times we have to do things very incrementally. Okay, we have to start with very basic building blocks and then going in iterations, okay, making everything more really complicated or complex or cloud native aware. Also, we have a lot of customers that they don't really have a cloud native applications. They are just embracing Kubernetes right now. Some of them are embracing Kubernetes because they want to know what Kubernetes is. It's like a hype right now. Okay, everything wants to go to Kubernetes, and they want to try Kubernetes, but the applications that they have are not really cloud native applications, are basically legacy applications, and they want to just put this legacy API or this legacy web or this maybe 2 or 3 services that they had in a single server on Kubernetes to start working with that and understand what Kubernetes can provide them and everything. So maybe it's a different maturity level.
This is a good point. And so, like you said, a lot of what you're trying to do is what can we do to work ourselves out of a job so that there's not that sort of dependency. And we'll talk a little bit about later. We'll talk about that a little bit later on related to vendor lock-in, because that's something we talk about a lot too. With Kubernetes, it's something that permits hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. Actually, it's funny because the first time I had that conversation about hybrid cloud and multi-cloud, I think was probably it was with Iwan Landa, your coworker, in around 2016, 2017. And they're explaining those ideas. Something else I want to ask you though too, because a lot of this we're talking about use cases, business cases. Is it uncomfortable sometimes to tell a customer that they have a legacy application and that they're not cloud native yet?
Yes. So basically, sometimes, well, the sometimes I say to the customers, okay, let me be honest with you. Okay, maybe that's not good for me. Okay, but I have to say that you shouldn't adopt Kubernetes right now because it will hurt you. You won't get really any benefit using Kubernetes because for if for the thing that you want to do to deploy this only kind of applications, trust me, is easier to go with, I don't know, with an app service or the beanstalk or everything that going to Kubernetes, which has a lot of complexity, and we will get no advantage really because your application is not ready to handle what all the benefits that Kubernetes can give to you. Okay, and that's one thing. Some customers say, okay, so maybe in this case we can go with the other way. Other customers say, no, we want to test Kubernetes, so we want to do that in Kubernetes. Okay, then let's go. And sometimes we also do like a long-term backlog. Okay, we will put that, but then if you want to really use Kubernetes in a full way, maybe we should start working how we can transform, we can refactor your application to a really cloud native approach. Okay, and we are working in some customers in that way too.
All right, very good. Now, does Azure offer any different features compared to other cloud providers on managed Kubernetes AKS?
I think that at least as far as I know, for the three big providers, Amazon and Google and Azure, I think that they are very similar. Okay, one of the advantages to go with managed Kubernetes has to deal also with that that you talked before about the cloud independency and multi-cloud and hybrid cloud and all the stuff. But but it's important to understand that sometimes part of the advantages of this managed Kubernetes are the integration with the cloud platform that they belong to. For example, in AKS, you can integrate the AKS security with Azure security. Okay, so instead of managing roles using the Kubernetes RBAC, you can use Azure RBAC pattern to deal with users, permissions, and all that stuff. Okay. Also, you can integrate all the users into Active Directory. So in this case, you are going against the multi-cloud and cloud independency. But most customers that we have, they use Azure and they plan to use only Azure. Okay, so probably they want all these features. Okay, we have other customers that they are adopting Kubernetes because of this cloud independency, or maybe hybrid cloud, or maybe multi-cloud approaches. Okay, and in this case, I don't think that's really a very, very, very big difference between AKS, AKS, or the Google, the GKA. Okay, I think that they are very similar on what they can do. Okay. They have minor differences about the versions of Kubernetes they support, some things that are easier with one than the other, but more or less, I think that, you know, they are spying each other.
Oh no, so, definitely. Yeah. No, I think that's very, very true. Now, in terms of your experience, because also at the beginning, just for maybe some of the folks who arrived a little bit later, your company Plain Concepts works in many different countries, right? In terms of the ones that I know off the top of my head, Spain, UK, I think also in Dubai, you had an office, or in Abu Dhabi?
Yes, commercial office in Dubai.
Okay. Also in the United States, particularly working close to Redmond, Washington, Seattle. And then additionally in the Netherlands and perhaps in other places. So you've worked with different customers in different areas, all right? What's the biggest war story that you have related to Kubernetes, with data on Kubernetes specifically, that you think where you know I'm never going to forget this? What's been something really challenging or difficult you had to deal with?
Hard to say, okay? Because at least right now, the hardest thing are not by Kubernetes itself, is because sometimes we're in the middle. We are in the middle, sometimes in a fight or in a, because a typical situation that happens with us is maybe we get a call from a customer, from an IT department. We have deployed that in Kubernetes and that doesn't work. That doesn't scale. We are losing a lot of money. That doesn't work. We have data loss, everything that you can imagine. Okay. And then we, maybe start working. We start doing our analysis. Sometimes it's hard because the customer itself is reluctant to give you all the information that you need because, you know, the SLAs, but not only SLAs, it's sometimes operational things. Sometimes it's hard to find that information. Some other times, you are in the middle between the customer and their provider. Okay, maybe some other developed something to put on Kubernetes and this thing doesn't scale very well, and you need to understand what's happening. Okay, who is the culprit? Maybe is the fault of the IT department of the Kubernetes configuration. Maybe it's the one who did the API. Okay, we have a case recently about an API that scaled very, 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 very bad. Okay, and it's a bit complicated. And sometimes it's because you don't have all the information. Okay, and sometimes you need to give some advices and you don't know exactly what you should do because you don't have all the ownership. And one thing that we always try to do is to have the ownership of the the project, if you want to say that, okay? Because if not, it's very hard, okay? And we have some, battles about that. And another interesting thing that happened is we are helping a customer right now to make a transition to Kubernetes. They are very new on Kubernetes, but not new only on Kubernetes. They are new on Docker, okay? And they have a plan and they want to replace all infrastructure that they have right now on premises to Kubernetes next year. Okay, and as you can imagine, this is very, very, very hard because it's a big company. There are a lot of people. You need to talk with a lot of people. You need to do some decisions about how you will implement everything about not only the Kubernetes itself, how you will distribute the clusters, how you will create the backups, how you will put the security, everything. Okay, and sometimes you don't have all the information because one day in a meeting, a new person pops up, someone that you never seen before, and say something, and you say, this changes everything. Yeah. So we are dealing with this kind of things.
I understand what you mean. And I think that probably happens to, other people. And as you said, particularly in the context of big companies, where you have these email chains with 15 people in copy, and all of a sudden one gets added and all these dynamics can go differently. So I guess the advice would be after these war stories is try to ask for as much information as possible in the very beginning, asking the right questions. Are there any particular questions that you would say, definitely remember to ask about this?
Yes. Who is the owner of each thing? Who is the owner of, first, for example, if we are using a Kubernetes as a executional platform, as a platform to deploy all the workloads of a company, okay, which are those workloads? Who is the owner of each workflow? Okay, workload, okay, and who will operate then? So who is the DevOps, or who will do the DevOps tasks? How are these DevOps organized in the company? Okay, and also who is the owner of the data? Who is the one that will manage the data? Who is the one that is responsible to make the backups and everything? Because a thing that I always ask when dealing with data is, for example, what is your data recovery plan? Okay, and sometimes it's very curious, but there are a lot of customers that we don't have that defined. Okay, so we need to define a data. We need to define a data recovery plan. We need to define what happens if your cluster crashes. And what is your SLA that you need? So what are the SLA that you need to offer for all the workloads that you have in the cluster? Okay, so that are the things that you need to understand before saying maybe you can go with a single cluster, maybe you need more clusters, maybe you need a high availability solution in different zones, replicate the clusters using an open ABS on top of that. All the things is that you need to understand before starting, but it's very, very, very hard.
This is good. And also, for example, just specifically with the point of a data recovery plan, now particularly as well, living in this era of GDPR and having data protection officers and chief data officers and things like that, do you still find that many companies, as you were saying, don't have a data recovery plan or aren't asking these questions?
Sometimes when I am asking questions about the data recovery plan, the answer is we don't have any clearly defined. Okay, and that's risk, and I found that very, very, very risky. Okay, but it's not only because a lot of companies say no, we have backups. Okay, but you have tried the restores. Do you have the restore procedure really tested? Okay, because do your restore works? And not only that, how are that automated? Okay, how do you know that you need to do a restore? Is because someone phones you at midnight, or do you have any kind of alert, or is the process automated using, I don't know, any failover group, whatever? Okay, so these are the kind of questions that when you start digging it, you find that more customers don't have a good answer for that. And also, sometimes the customers say, okay, now is that in Kubernetes, when we can start to using this new Kubernetes, Edu, that you has provided to us for using, I don't know, this kind of workloads. For example, a development environment or a pre-production environment. No. we need to define first a set of tests to make sure that we are able to recover the data that we put in. Okay, so there are a lot of customers that it's hard for them to understand really the need of that.
Do you think that sometimes as well too that the cost reduction or cost optimization might be a part of that?
Probably. I think that not sure if it's cost reduction. Maybe is sometimes the typical mindset that I'm just doing backups, I'm fine, that won't happen to me. I think that's human things. Okay, it's something like that. Probably if you are a big company, and probably if you have a very good data recovery plan, and probably if you do the things very well, for example, a ransomware attack wouldn't hurt you so much. But the truth is, a ransomware attacks will hurt so much a lot of companies, because a lot of companies don't have these procedures well done, because probably they are very hard to do well. And they are very time consuming, and you need to put a lot of, not only money, a lot of time, resources, effort to make sure that you have your data recovery plan well defined, covering all the possible scenarios. And it's not only having a backup, it's where are your backups. So are the backups in the same, I don't know, network region or whatever that you have your workload? What happens if you have a regional outage? Are you going to handle that? So there are a lot of questions that you need to ask yourself.
Okay. Now, something we talked about a little bit in the beginning that I think a lot of people are interested in right now is we're very frequently talking about changes that are constantly happening, whether it's new versions of Kubernetes every 3 months, whether it's new political changes in different countries, all these different things that are happening. With Docker, all right, what has been your experience with Docker, and how do you see the current situation? Are we going to have to be thinking about a post-Docker future? Is this something that is going to be moving away from the Kubernetes landscape ecosystem? Is it going to have to go through some transitions? How do you see it?
Okay, I was talking with a colleague about that last days, about the announcement of the Docker deprecation in Kubernetes 1.20, I think. But I think that's a clear example of the bad communication. Okay, so that's a clear example that you need to be very cautious when you say something to the whole world in this case. Okay, because the Docker deprecation in Kubernetes is a thing that won't affect, probably only affects to Kubernetes administrators. Okay, so if you are not administering a Kubernetes, that won't affect you. So if you are a developer and you are developing for Kubernetes, you can still using Docker safely if you want in your development workflows. There are no changes on that. So there is no more Docker. We need to find alternatives. Let's go jump to Podman or any other runtime like Containerd. By the way, Docker uses Containerd, so it's a relationship that there are a lot of people that don't know, and they don't need to know the internals of Docker. Okay, no, Docker uses Containerd, Containerd uses Rancy. Okay, that is good for techies, but you as a developer, if your concern is developing applications and then putting into containers, maybe you don't need to know exactly how Docker works internally. Okay. So probably the announcement of Kubernetes that they will deprecate Docker frightened a lot of people, but will have almost zero impact probably, unless you are a Kubernetes administrator. In this case, you need to find some alternative to Docker. Can have some implications if you are running your CI/CD pipelines in Kubernetes, okay, and you are building images in these CI/CD pipelines. And for example, if you are using some approaches like Docker out of Docker or Docker in Docker, maybe in these cases you can be affected and you need to change that. But if you are doing that, if you are running your CI/CD pipelines in Kubernetes, building containers inside a container using Docker in Docker, you are in a maturity level that probably you know that. So you know that you need to change that by this deprecation. So if you are in this maturity level, you are not frightened with this Kubernetes announcement. So basically, if what Kubernetes said about deprecating Docker scared you, that means that this announcement don't affect you. Probably.
So yeah,
I
so
think that
it's probably not the, yeah, like you said, is one thing is the actual message, another thing is how it's communicated and which style and which form, and taking into consideration the end users that actually are going to be affected by it. And as you said, the people that are going to be at such a level that it's
yes.
something that they should be able to manage. I think just in general, these things, you know, we do see technologies, you know, rise, fall, they're born, they die, they migrate, they get absorbed. Some that tried to initially move away from Kubernetes originally, then started going back, realizing, you know, this is the way things are going to be. So it's better for us to be in this than to be against it.
One of the related to that, the changing wave about Kubernetes is, I think that we have around 4 versions of Kubernetes each year. This year have just 3 for the COVID, and they are debating that will be permanent or not, but doesn't matter. We have a few versions of Kubernetes each year, okay, and that means that you can be easily deprecated over a short period of time. I think that they are doing a very good way about the deprecation policy and their new introductions policy about, you know, putting features in alpha, then in beta for a couple of versions until reaching availability. So I think that they are handling this very well, but they are moving so fast, okay, that you are in risk to maybe, I don't know, maybe you start investigating Kubernetes last year, maybe using, I don't know which was the version, maybe Kubernetes 1.16, okay, and some of the simple things, but maybe some of the manifest YAML that you are using in 1.16 won't work in 1.80 and 120, sorry. Okay, and they're moving so fast, and the managed Kubernetes providers, okay, they are deprecating versions very fast. So you need to constantly force to being you know, updating yourself and make sure that you are on place. And this can be exhausting sometimes for some companies. They know, I just want to put that in Kubernetes and let it work. But okay, but keep in mind that this Kubernetes that you have now in 3 years will be absolutely outdated.
Completely outdated, and nobody will be talking about it. With that in mind as well, too, like, you know, I think this is something that's quite frequent in tech, and actually I'll comment on this a little bit later too, is the importance of being an eternal student, of just knowing that there are always going to be new things coming out. You're going to have to learn. How do you stay up to date? What I mean, do you read blogs? Do you do courses? What do you do?
I read a lot of blogs,
Okay.
more than books. I read some books, but I read more blogs than books because sometimes for my job, I need to make sure that I understand the big picture more than the details, okay? And then I dig the details when I need them, but I need to be aware about the big picture, about what are the new features or deprecations, or about the new trending topics or the new waves or the everything. Okay, so I tend to read a lot of blogs, some books also about the topics that I really want to dig in. Okay, sometimes I see videos, but most time when I see videos about, you know, typical thing that you can see, for example, right now there are the KubeCon videos on YouTube available. Okay, sometimes I put these videos on my secondary monitor when I'm working. I'm just listening them, and when I say there's a topic that maybe interests me, I try to pay some attention about the video stopping. But it's just to gather some ideas. The other thing that I think it's very helpful for me for learning is to write a blog. I write a blog, and when I choose a topic to write on my blog, sometimes I write about things that I really know, that I already know very well, and in this case, I simply write everything. But sometimes I choose a topic, and then I do a little research on that. It's a topic that maybe interests me for any reason, for a project, for whatever. Okay, and that is a very good way of learning, I think, because forces you. So if you need to write something, you need to understand quite well what do you want to write. So then you are forced to learn that. Okay. And the other way is I have a lot of pet projects. Okay, 0 finished, 100% unfinished, but I enjoy more the creation part because it's when I learn a lot of the kind of technology that I'm working. And
Could you give us an example of one of those projects?
yes, right now, for example, I'm working on a library, okay, for doing console applications, full screen console applications. Okay, I learned a lot using this library because I have to learn. I never did. I never knew how the console work in Linux, for example. So I have to learn a lot of new topics. Okay, that maybe it's not something that will save your job day, but it's funny, and everything, it's for change. Okay, also, for example, I write a very small library to do some kind of functional programming in .NET. Okay, because I were by this time I was studying a bit of Kotlin and also some things about Scala. And okay, and you say, okay, oh, I like this kind of pattern of the language of the programming. Let's see how we can put that on the net. Okay, and sometimes I try to do very small utilities from a new kind of language that I'm learning. For example, I'm learning Go. Okay, because if you want to really collaborate in Kubernetes and Docker, all this world is built using Go. So I'm learning Go, and for me, the best way to learn something is doing something. So I start to do very simple programs. So maybe, I don't know, a program that downloads something from the internet and makes some analysis, a very small library to deal with the Kubernetes API and do something with a cluster. I don't know, very little things, and that's usually how I try to be.
Okay, very good. Now, something about maybe you had this as a project or not, but have you ever worked on an operator?
Not an operator, really. Controller, yes. Okay. Uh, Basically, the difference between an operator and a controller is operator is a higher level of abstraction, which deals with an external project. Okay. I have never had the need to build a fully operator. Okay. Controller, yes, a couple of times. Okay. Uh, but really, to be honest, they were more like demos for talks, because another thing that I enjoy very much is doing public talks about technology, talking in programming events. And last years, I'm basically talking about Kubernetes. Okay. And I had some talks about extending Kubernetes using controllers, custom controllers, and operators. Okay. And I write a couple of sample easy operators for showing the talks. That's basically in production for customers. Really not, because the things that I needed to deploy, there's usually really an operator for that. Okay, although right now I have to say that I'm thinking to write an operator for a specific need that I'm having with a customer. Okay, but I don't know if I will end up with an operator or not.
Okay, that's yet to be decided. You will let us know.
Yes, well, basically it depends. It depends on what the customer wanted to do. Okay, in
And
this
that's a really good
case.
point as well too. Is that, and we talk about this a lot in the community, is that you can't oblige your customers to use a technology that they simply don't need. Like, do you have, like you said, or is it maturity levels? How much data are we talking about in the case of storage or different things like that? What kind of observability, availability, mobility? What kind of latency are we talking about? All these different factors that are going to come in there. We don't need to answer a question that hasn't been asked. So like you
Mhm.
said, depending on the customer's needs, it's either going to be this solution or another solution. Is there always going to be a little bit of debate about exactly which one is going to work best for everybody? Some of it depends on preferences. Also, you said as well, depending on how much information a customer is willing to give you, that will also guide you towards one solution or
Yeah.
another. But I think those are really good points. Just and obviously we'll have to put a link to your blog later on when we post all this stuff on social media. Now we're getting to some of the really interesting stuff about you. All right. So on your LinkedIn, it says that you have a master's degree in quantic chromodynamics on blockchain with Calabi-Yau topology. Can you explain how you got that and what recommendations you might give to other people
Yes,
for their LinkedIn
yeah.
profiles?
I did the same thing that most Spanish politicians do, which is simply lie. Okay, that is because
Cultural fun fact for everyone.
no, no, that is just of course a joke on my profile, and the joke came because I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, 1 year ago, I don't remember. Time flies so fast. There was a scandal here in Spain where a lot of politicians had some master in economics or something like that for a university. I think that's Universidad Juan Carlos, but I don't remember exactly which one was.
I think it was.
Okay, but they never go to any class, never do any work, just they have
Exams,
the
nothing.
master
Yeah, yeah.
degree. Okay, so I just said, okay, if they have a master degree invented, I can have mine too. Okay, so I basically choose three random things and put them together in my fake master degree. Okay, and I think that is the name of the university is Universidad Cifuentes, which was one of these politicians. Okay, so it's just but a small joke on my
No, but
LinkedIn profile.
it's just funny is because sometimes you encounter all different kinds of people in these different technological ecosystems, and some people say I've been working on Kubernetes since 2012, and it's like, are you sure you have? It came out in 2012.
Yes, there were, I don't know, maybe a couple of months, 3 months in Twitter. I think that I saw a job offer that they were requesting 10 years of experience in Kubernetes. So, like, what?
Yeah, no, it's funny, and it just shows the lack of knowledge sometimes in the human resources world of ask for lots of experience. If we put 10, maybe we'll find somebody with 5, but it's like you simply can't ask those questions. I think I saw the same meme floating around on Twitter and on LinkedIn. Now, so we've talked about a lot of different stuff. Two other things that we haven't talked about yet that I think can relate to all this, particularly when we're talking about mentality. All right, is that you mentioned in your Twitter profile that you really like heavy metal music. All right.
Yes.
Now, some people might say heavy metal music isn't for everybody. I would disagree with that, and I would say it is. I also would say that because I think there is a kind of heavy metal music out there for everyone, right? You have so many different kinds. You have melodic, you have jazz, you have
Yeah.
grindcore, you have hardcore, you have new metal, you have power metal, you have thrash metal. You have all these different kinds of metal out there. And so I think really you just have to be open-minded enough to kind of test it out and try it out. What has your experience been? I mean, how did you start listening to metal music in general? And just in the idea of being open-minded and the necessary mentality to work with these technologies that we're talking about in data on Kubernetes, maybe we can kind of relate those two things together.
I don't know how to answer.
Don't worry, don't worry. But you just tell us about your metal experience. When did you start listening to metal?
When I was young, mm, I think that I think that when was in my hardest role playing time, okay, dragons, princess, all that stuff, and there are a lot of metal, and probably some of the colleagues passed me maybe some CD or maybe not CD, maybe it was a tape. Okay, now you have to listen that because they're very good and they talk about dragons and princesses, and I don't know, and probably started here, but I like it. I like it, and then I remember that I had uh, during some years, once a month, I went to the disc store, okay, to the music store on my town, and I randomly choose one CD. Uh, Only by the I don't know the word
The
in
covers,
English.
the portada.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
la
the
portada.
cover.
Yes, only if they were some dragon or some warrior or maybe the letters. I like the typography. Maybe I buy it. I bought that. Sometimes it was a total failure, but sometimes I ended up by knowing a new group and music, and that's how it started. Years later, well, Spotify and basically Spotify make very easier to discover new groups, and
Yeah, but what I think here is the easy transition is that in that same spirit of whether I'm going to read a blog, I'm going to watch a video, I'm going to listen to a podcast of something that I know nothing about, and that you just have to just jump right in, and maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. But I think that's a very recurring theme that we talk about a lot in our community, is that it's probably not going to work on the first try. When I was talking to a guy who works for Red Hat and is very active in the Strimsy project, he said you have to have a sort of DIY approach. Like there's going to be trial and error. There are going to be things that don't work, but don't worry about it. You know, just take that as part of the process. You know, there are going to be some setbacks and difficulties. Once again, I love the Lord of the Rings image. You know, you don't get to throw the ring in Mount Doom in one day. It takes 3 books, and actually it takes a prequel with The Hobbit and all the other things that had to go along with it. And another thing as well too that you mentioned in your profile that I think it ties into this well is craft beer. All right, and you know, craft beer is you know, only been growing in popularity internationally. Where near where you live, Barcelona is probably one of the capitals, we could say, of that in terms of Spain. And I think also some people don't like it, but I also think there's so much variety out there that you just have to try. You know, you've got to try and see what works best for you.
It's the same like metal music. There's a craft beer for everyone. You only need to find yours. Yeah. Okay. And that's really true because, for example, my girlfriend, she don't like beers. She don't like almost any beer, but there are a couple of craft beers that she enjoys. Okay. And it's good because are the ones that I don't like, so we never fight.
More for you and more for her.
Oh, that's very good. Okay, she's more from Berliner Weisses, Lambics, and that kind of beers. I'm more for IPAs and Imperial Stouts. Okay, so that's the 2 flavors that I like most.
Yeah, but you have to identify what are the things that work for you and not expect that those things are going to work for everybody else.
Yes. Regarding about so translating that to my job or my Kubernetes is okay. In this case, I need to find the experience that will work for every customer. So I need to understand the customer, what's his culture, okay? Because it's very hard to change the culture of a customer because that's a very long process. Okay, sometimes happen, but it's not usual. So basically, you need to understand what's the best practices that will work best for each customer. Okay, and what you said before, sometimes we have failures. Okay, and that's normal. I always say that a failure is good if you learn about that failure, what happened, why happened, what's the problem. Most times the problem is not the technology or the what you did. Okay, most times the real reason of a failure is the culture. Okay, maybe, I don't know, maybe the thing that you created or you did is good and works well, but requires a level of maintainability or maturity or whatever that the customer don't want to do that. Okay, maybe, I don't know, maybe you don't need to go to customer and say, no, we will do everything. We will do I don't know, blue-green deployment infrastructure for making your deployment without downgrades, okay, without stopping anything. You will have an SLA of 100% everything, but maybe they don't need that, and they don't want to deal with all the requirements of using blue-green deployment. So there are a lot of things that when you work with customers, okay, there are a lot of things that you need to understand first. What's your customer, how he works. Maybe you can give, of course, you can give advices. If I were you, I think that we should do that, okay? But the end decision should always come from the customer, because to be successful, the customer needs to trust the thing that you did, and it's very hard if you try to impose him with.
Yeah, the customer needs to be the one leading. I understand. I think it's a very good point. And because if not, it's like you said, there's a lack of trust. There's not that kind of confidence that you want to be able to move forward, which is so interesting because, like I always said, we talk so much about technologies. We talk about operators, about data sets, about all these different things. But at the end of the day, there's a very strong human and a very strong cultural element that seems to be part of every conversation we have, because we're not talking about technologies, we're talking about them being implemented by people, for people, to solve problems. And every company is in a different phase. Everybody could have a good day or a bad day. There are so many different factors that can influence that. That I think that's a very, very
Yes,
strong
about that. Just there's a question that at least every customer sooner or later about Kubernetes asks to me is that, Edu, we can put databases on Kubernetes. Okay, that's a typical question, and the answer is maybe. So it's technically possibly yes. Yes, we can do that, and it's hard. It's not easy, but it's easier over the time because, for example, there are appearing a lot of operators to automatically deploy your databases in high availability. There we have a lot of systems to manage the persistent volume. So probably it's easier today to put some database in Kubernetes than, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. Okay, although the basic building blocks are the same, but right now we have more abstractions on the top that help us a lot. Okay, but the question is, do you feel comfortable with that? Do you want that? Do you really need that? Because really, having your databases in Kubernetes have some advantages in terms of Kubernetes is your only platform. You manage your database in the same way that you manage your code. Okay, so the Kubernetes manifest are your single truth. You don't need to, I don't know, think about other managements. Everything that's good. Okay, but maybe if you have, I don't know, 10 databases and you will only put one database in Kubernetes and the only 9 will be on the cloud or in your on premises, maybe you don't need that. So that's always this kind of decisions. So I always say that it's possible to do, but it's best option for you. I don't know.
And once again, coming back to the question of transparency, asking the right questions, getting the right information in the beginning, all of these different things that we talked about in terms of mentality, and then applying those with these wonderful examples of heavy metal and craft beer. It's perfect. In terms of future things that we can be expecting to see in the Kubernetes landscape, the Kubernetes ecosystem, particularly related to data, is there anything that you could comment, for example, on data meshes or anything else that you see in terms of trends for the coming year?
I think that data meshes will be one of the big, I think the two meshes will be the two big things coming to Kubernetes. So data meshes and service meshes will be the two big things. Okay. And also I expect to see a lot ground of databases, Kubernetes specific databases. Okay, we have some kind of these databases right now, but I think that this will be one of the things that maybe we should start thinking, okay, if you are developing a cloud native application, maybe we can start forgetting about the traditional databases, okay? We also can forget maybe the traditional NoSQL databases, and maybe we can go to a specific Kubernetes databases. I don't know exactly, because this is this is a fight between all the database providers. So and everything is aware that Kubernetes is right now leading the battle where most projects will run in the following year. So everything is trying to adapt itself to Kubernetes. Okay. But in the same way that we are seeing a lot of, for example, message brokers that are specifically built for Kubernetes with a high integration in Kubernetes, that they cannot run without Kubernetes. I think that we will start seeing a lot of new data stores, databases, specifically designed for cloud native Kubernetes applications.
Very good stuff. Now, we're getting to just about the end, and Eduard, we have a tradition every time we have a fantastic guest as yourself, is that while we are talking, our friend Angel, who you met in the very beginning, was creating an artistic interpretation of all the different things that we've been talking about. So, Gorka, if you can share our screen so that Eduard can see, can you see what Angel did?
Ooh, that's incredible.
we're pretty lucky that Angel has enough talent to get all these different ideas that we've been talking about in the last hour and get them all into one place. So anyway, we'll be sending that to you. We'll be putting it out on Twitter, on LinkedIn. Anyway, Eduard, I think we got a lot of great takeaways from here. We talked about a lot of stuff in just about an hour. Gorka, can we go back to my screen? And one other thing that I want to mention, Eduardo, before we finish, is that for the last few weeks, what we've been doing every time to say thanks to the people who are participating as speakers is that our community makes a donation to a foundation in the United States called The Last Mile, which teaches programming to folks who are incarcerated in prisons so that they can have better possibilities to get jobs when they finish and once they're released. And one of the things that I think is so important about what we talked about and what you mentioned about the importance of reading blogs, writing blogs, trial and error, going to the music store and buying an album just because of the cover. This kind of spirit is something that we're trying to also transmit with our conversations with this foundation, The Last Mile. So anyway, thank you so much for your generosity, your time, your ideas. Hope that everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. I definitely learned a lot as usual. Eduard, we'll need to get the link for your blog, so you can just send it to me on Slack so we can put that as well so that people can follow you. Also on Twitter. You tweet in Catalan, but also in English, and maybe
I tweet mostly in Spanish. Okay. Sometimes I do some tweets in Catalan where are some local things about Igualada and some friends, and sometimes I put something in English, but not so much.
Okay, but it's a good excuse for everybody to learn other languages, cultures, and things like that. So we always appreciate that. Eduard, I hope that 2020 will end soon, and then in 2021 we can have a beer and listen to some heavy metal together.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
Perfect.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so
everybody.
much for
and thanks
inviting
to
me.
our thanks to our technical team. We got Gorka Gomez from Gaste Equipo. And we've got a lot of other people involved in the team as well. Courtney Nickerson, Iker Arfe, Miguel Nicolas Rodriguez, Ari Vandenbos, and Mike Carr. Thanks to everyone for making this possible. We'll see you in Slack. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.